The Officers Club at Andrews Air Force Base was a symphony of precision and pride. Crystal glasses clinked with the sound of restrained celebration, reflecting the polished metals adorning the chests of the nation's finest. The air, thick with the scent of expensive cologne and floor wax, vibrated with the confident murmurs of men and women who moved with the sharp, economical grace of a life dedicated to order. On the hallowed walls, oil-painted portraits of four-star generals and legendary aviators stared down with stoic approval, their gazes a silent testament to the legacy being honored this evening. It was the annual Air Force Gala, a night where careers were made, alliances were forged, and the immaculate image of military exceptionalism was polished to a blinding sheen. Into this world of starched collars and razor-sharp creases walked Vance. She was a ghost from a different era, a forgotten photograph slipped between the glossy pages of a modern magazine. At nearly 80, her frame was delicate, her steps measured and soft on the gleaming parquet floor. She wore a simple, dark blue dress, the kind of modest garment one might wear to a Sunday service, but it was almost entirely obscured by what she wore over it, a faded, olive-drabbed M65 field jacket. The garment was an anachronism, an artifact of a forgotten, grittier time. Its fabric was worn thin at the elbows and collar, the color bleached by decades of sun and struggle. It hung loosely on her small shoulders, a silent rebellion against the sea of pristine Air Force dress blues surrounding her. Her presence did not go unnoticed. Ripples of disdain spread through the assembled officers. They were subtle at first, a raised eyebrow here, a whispered comment there, but they soon found their champion in Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thorne. Thorne was the epitome of the modern officer. His uniform was so perfectly tailored, it seemed shrink-wrapped to his athletic frame. His medals, earned in sanitized drone operations and strategic command centers, were impeccably aligned. He saw himself as a guardian of the Air Force's pristine image, and Elvira Vance was a smudge on his perfect portrait. To him, she was not a person, but a problem of protocol, an unacceptable deviation from the evening's flawless order. Flanked by two young, eager captains who mirrored his every sneer, Thorne moved to intercept her. He cut her off near a table laden with hors d'oeuvres, his body language a wall of polished authority. "Ma'am," he began, his voice dripping with condescension that he mistook for professional courtesy, "I believe you've made a wrong turn. The civilian contractor's entrance is around the back. This area is for distinguished service members and their invited guests." Elvira's eyes, the color of a faded sky, met his. They held a quiet weariness, a profound depth that Thorne was too shallow to perceive. "I was invited," she said, her voice soft but clear, holding no trace of defensiveness. Thorne let out a short, incredulous laugh. One of the captains smirked. "Invited? Ma'am, with all due respect, look around you. This is a formal event for the leaders of the United States Air Force. Your attire is hardly appropriate." His gaze fell pointedly on her field jacket, a look of utter disgust twisting his handsome features. "That thing should have been retired 30 years ago. What did you do? Pull it out of a surplus store for the occasion?" The small circle of officers around them chuckled. The humiliation was now a public spectacle. Elvira simply smoothed a worn cuff of the jacket with her wrinkled fingers. "This jacket is important to me," she said, her voice steady. Thorne's patience, already thin, snapped. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a harsh, menacing whisper. "This isn't a VFW hall where you can swap tired old stories. This is a place of honor. Men and women here have served in real, modern conflicts. They have commanded wings, flown sorties, and made decisions that affect global security. So I'll ask you one more time, what could you have possibly done to earn a place here? And why are you disrespecting this event by wearing those rags?" He gestured at her jacket again, this time with a dismissive flick of his fingers, as if brushing away a piece of lint. He was enjoying this, the exercise of his power, the public correction of an anomaly that offended his sense of order. He felt righteous, strong, a defender of tradition. He had no idea he was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to be pushed into an abyss of his own ignorance. The lieutenant colonel, emboldened by the silence of the onlookers and the quiet dignity of her target, decided to press his advantage. He wanted to utterly dismantle her, to make an example of her for anyone else who dared to defy the unspoken rules of his world. His eyes scanned the worn jacket, searching for a final, definitive point of ridicule. They landed on a small, unassuming patch sewn on the right sleeve just below the shoulder. It was unlike any insignia he had ever seen. It wasn't the proud eagle of a numbered Air Force, nor the bold emblem of a famous squadron. It was a simple 3-inch square of black, faded fabric. In its center was a single, exquisitely embroidered shape, a silver teardrop. There were no letters, no numbers, no other symbols. It was stark, minimalist, and utterly bizarre. To Thorne, it was the final proof of her delusion. "And what is this supposed to be?"
he sneered, his voice loud enough for the entire room to hear. He tapped the patch with his finger. "The emblem for your knitting club, the 1st Battalion of Sad Old Ladies." A fresh wave of sycophantic laughter rippled through his immediate circle, but this time it was cut short. The atmosphere in the room had begun to change. Ilar looked down at the patch, and for the first time, a deep, profound sorrow flickered in her eyes. A universe of loss and memories seemed to swirl in their depths. She didn't answer him. She didn't need to. The first person to truly see it was a command sergeant major standing guard by the ceremonial flag display. He was a grizzled veteran of the old school, a man whose face was a roadmap of deployments to places that didn't officially exist on any map. He had been idly observing the confrontation, a grimace of distaste for Thorne's arrogance already on his lips. When Thorne pointed to the patch, the sergeant major's eyes narrowed. He froze, a tray of champagne flutes in his hand, utterly forgotten. His blood ran cold. He hadn't seen that symbol in 40 years, not since a heavily redacted after-action report he'd been forced to sign an NDA to even glance at. It was from a briefing about a unit that officially never was, a ghost story told in hushed tones in secure windowless rooms. It was a myth, a terrifying, bloody myth, and it was right there on the sleeve of an old woman being mocked by a child in a colonel's uniform. The sergeant major's shock was a tangible thing. It radiated outwards. A 2-star general standing nearby noticed the NCO's pallor and followed his terrified gaze to the patch. The general's jovial conversation with a congressman died in his throat. His face went slack with disbelief, then hardened with a dawning, horrified respect. He took an involuntary step back, as if the patch itself exerted a physical force. The ripple effect was instantaneous. Senior officers and NCOs, those old enough to have served during the iciest depth of the Cold War, one by one turned to look. The laughter was gone, replaced by a thick, heavy silence that suffocated the room. Whispers turned to stunned gasps. The air crackled with a tension so immense it felt like the pressure in a diving submarine. Lieutenant Colonel Thorne was suddenly alone in the center of a silent, staring circle. His smug confidence began to curdle into confusion and then into a sickening dread. He didn't understand what was happening, but he knew with a primal certainty that he had made a catastrophic error. The patch was no longer a joke. It was a judgment. If you're enjoying the story of forgotten heroes, leave a like and subscribe to support this small channel and help keep these stories alive. Just as the silence reached its breaking point, a path cleared through the crowd. The host of the evening, General Marcus Hawthorne, was making his way toward the commotion. A 4-star legend, Hawthorne was a man carved from granite, known for his unshakable composure in the face of enemy fire and political pressure alike. His face was a mask of stern authority as he approached, clearly intending to restore order. "What is the meaning of this, Colonel?" he boomed, his eyes fixed on Thorne. Thorne, desperate for an ally, puffed out his chest. "Sir, I was simply handling a civilian who had wandered into a restricted area. She refuses to leave and is wearing a questionable uniform accessory." Hawthorne's gaze shifted from Thorne's face to Ilar, and then down to the sleeve of her jacket. He saw the patch, The change was terrifying to behold. The granite mask of General Hawthorne did not just crack, it disintegrated. All the color drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy, ghostly pale. His breath hitched in his chest, a strangled, audible gasp. His eyes, which had faced down enemy MiGs in congressional committees without flinching, widened with a look of pure, unadulterated awe and devastation. For a moment, it looked as though his legs might buckle beneath him. The entire room held its breath, witnessing the complete unraveling of their most formidable leader. He ignored Thorne completely, striding past the younger officer as if he were a piece of furniture. He stopped less than a foot from Alar Vance, his entire powerful frame trembling. Then, with the speed and precision that defied his age, he snapped to the most rigid, perfect salute of his storied career. His hand was a blade, slicing the air and holding its position with unwavering reverence. And then the tears came. Silent, thick tears streamed from the general's eyes, carving paths down his weathered cheeks before dripping onto the polished stars on his shoulders. He did not sob. He did not make a sound, but his raw, unfiltered grief and reverence filled the silent room. Lieutenant Colonel Thorne's jaw hung open, his mind utterly incapable of processing the scene. A four-star general was openly weeping while saluting a confused-looking old woman in a tattered jacket. Holding the salute with one hand, Hawthorne turned his head just enough to fix Thorne with a gaze that burned with a cold, righteous fire. His voice, when it came, was a ragged whisper that carried more weight than any parade ground shout. "Let me educate you, Colonel." He paused, letting the words hang in the air like a death sentence. "You are a fool. You stand there in your perfect uniform, so proud of your sanitized service, and you dare to mock this woman. You are not worthy to breathe the same air she exhales. You are not worthy to wipe the dust from her shoes." He took a ragged breath, his eyes still locked on Alar. "This room is filled with heroes, but none of them, none of us could ever hold a candle to the woman you just tried to humiliate. You see, Colonel, we were all given a choice. We chose this life. We were supported by the might of the United States military. We had names, ranks, and serial numbers. If we fell, we received a flag and a hero's burial. We were soldiers." His voice dropped, becoming thick with emotion. "She was something else. She was a ghost, a whisper, a necessary nightmare that this country created to keep the wolves at bay while men like you slept safely in your beds." Hawthorne finally looked at the patch, his voice filled with a sacred awe. "That is not an insignia. It is a memorial. It is the emblem of a unit that never existed, a unit so secret its designation was classified Umbra level. Above top secret, known only to 2 presidents and a handful of handlers. They were called the Orphanage, and their agents were the Griefbringers. Their sole purpose was to take on the missions that were not only impossible, but unwinnable, missions from which no return was ever expected. In 1968, she walked into East Berlin with nothing but a fake passport and a knife, and walked out a week later with a defecting nuclear physicist and the schematics for the entire Warsaw Pact's early warning system. Her entire 3-person team was captured and executed. She alone completed the mission. In 1973, he continued, his voice cracking, she was dropped into the Ural Mountains to sabotage a Soviet biological weapons facility. She spent 3 months in the dead of winter hunted by Spetsnaz trackers and succeeded. We listed her as killed in action. 6 months later, she appeared at an embassy in Finland, half frozen and weighing 80 pounds, but the facility was a crater in the ground. His gaze fell to the worn fabric of her jacket. This jacket, you mock this jacket. She used this jacket to wrap a wounded CIA informant, carrying him for 2 days through the Afghani mountains while bleeding from a gunshot wound to her own side. The man she saved went on to prevent a war. She was left for dead again, but Sorrow 6 doesn't die. Finally, he looked back at the patch. That black square represents the darkness they operated in, the void. And the silver tear, It was awarded only once to an agent upon the confirmed death of every other member of their unit. It's called the Last Orphan's Tear. She's the only person to ever wear it. She carries the memory of every ghost we sent into the dark. She has no medals, no pension, no official record of service because her country asked her to erase herself for the greater good. Your entire decorated career, Colonel, is a footnote in the story of her sacrifice. Hawthorne finally reluctantly dropped his salute. He turned to Thorne, whose face was a mask of utter horror and shame. You are relieved of your command effective immediately. Get out of my sight. You are a disgrace to that uniform. As Thorne stumbled away, Hawthorne gently took Ilar's hand. He led her to the front of the room, to the guest of honor seat beside his own. As she passed, every single person in the room, from the youngest airman to the oldest general, rose to their feet, their faces a mixture of awe, shame, and profound, tearful respect. A spontaneous, silent salute rippled through the hall, a wave of honor for the forgotten hero who had walked among them unrecognized. If you're enjoying the story of forgotten heroes, leave a like and subscribe to support this small channel and help keep these stories alive. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to subscribe. It means the world to us. Don't forget to like and share this video so more people can discover stories that truly matter.